So as Joe said, I'm the program director here, which means that I sort of work with companies in sort of designing the pilots. We also do some sort of research and consulting. Um, and this is a movement that I've been studying for the last few years. And one of the things that has really struck me about it is the degree to which this is a genuinely global movement, right? It's not just Nordic countries or Australia, New Zealand that have done it, but we're seeing it in Latin America, India, even Japan and Korea, two countries that have their own words for sort of working yourself to death. It's also diverse in terms of the kinds of businesses and industries that have participated. So it's not just software companies like Hutch, which is a mobile games company in London, who's a participant in the UK trial, but also companies like or Pursuit Marketing, which is a B2B sort of marketing company in Glasgow, Scotland, or Pressure Drop, which is a craft brewery located in Tottenham. So, and they range in size now from literally 3 people to 3,000. Now, companies have sort of adopted shorter work weeks kind of in an effort to solve often familiar but existential challenges, right? Issues with recruitment and retention, work-life balance. Often the founders are motivated, or team, has a health scare or some other event that forces them how to rethink how they work. Though for a lot of us, sort of the pandemic has served as that inciting event. They also share a faith that they can fix what's broken in their industries, that they've had enough experience, that they have employees or a team who can help take up this challenge. And so you put all those together, and the 4-day week goes from something that is kind of a crazy idea to something that is sort of actually within the realm of possibility. And in particular, one of the key insights they have is that, in a sense, the 4-day week is already here, right? Advances in technology have sort of improved our productivity such that we actually can do a 4-day week, but the 4-day week is just buried under 2 or 3 hours a day, lost to things like poorly run meetings, distractions and interruptions, or badly used technology. And so if you can get a handle on those things, if you can redesign meetings, redesign the workday, outsource and automate less valuable tasks, figure out how to use technology to support deep work rather than distraction, you can go a long way to doing in 4 days what currently you're doing in 5. Now, one of the things that we work with companies on is not just rethinking how they work and figuring out ways of working more effectively and sort of improving sort of collaboration and so on. But we also work with them on designing trials. So now, part of the reason for doing a trial is that, of course, this is something that's quite novel, and so sort of it's good to be able to do it in a more experimental sort of way. It's a way of generating data that can be helpful if you need to, for large organizations that need to convince their boards that this is something that'll work. It's an opportunity to experiment with new tools while also sometimes suspending some old rules. You can fail fast, you can learn, you can iterate. It's a chance to study and to reflect on how people work somewhat more intensively than companies are accustomed to. And then, of course, if it doesn't work, there's still an opportunity to go back to sort of a 5-day week. And we work with you to think through how to make the trial a success, but also how to design it so that if it turns out that this isn't for you, that you can go back with sort of a minimum of damage to the company. Now, very briefly, what do companies see in terms of sort of results when they move to 4-day weeks? The first question, of course, always is what happens to revenues and profitability. Well, one of my favorite examples is a sort of tech startup in Korea called Woowa Brothers. They're kind of Korea's equivalent to DoorDash or Deliveroo. They started cutting their working hours in 2015 and as they did so, their revenues went up tenfold, and eventually they were purchased by a Singaporean consortium for, I think, just over about $4 billion or so. So obviously revenue and value growth is not incompatible with sort of a shorter work week. It also has positive impacts on our company culture. So, obviously people feel, they're happier when they have more free time, but they also work better when they have more free time. This is a score, Office Vibe score from a Danish company called IIH Nordic that implemented a 4-day week in 2015. And you can see that after some ups and downs, that sort of they rank among sort of the Office Vibes or top companies for relationships with peers, trust and collaboration. And then finally, there's even, happiness at work goes up. This is Synergy Vision, which did a survey just before implementing a trial in November, and found that about 12% of people were very happy at work. 6 months later, more than 50% were. So these are some of the benefits that we see with 4-day work weeks. And and I will hand things back to Joe, who can tell you more about how 4-day week works and how we can help you to sort of achieve them. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks very much for that overview, Alex, which I hope gives people a sense of the growing international momentum behind the 4-day week movement, but also a few examples of how organizations have managed to make this happen in practice over the last number of years. So before we get to the presentation that myself and Juliet will be taking you through, which is really an overview of what the pilot program itself involves and also what our research project is studying, I'm going to go to Margaret Cox, who's the director of the ICE Group, a company in Ireland who have been operating on a 4-day week basis for a number of years now. She's going to tell you a little bit about their experience since they moved to a 4-day work week. Over to you, Margaret. Thanks. We can't hear you, and we're just seeing your floor at the moment, Margaret. So, okay, maybe what I might do is I'm going to go to Rosa.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Margaret. We can't see you. Your camera is focused around the other way, but we can hear you.
Okay, how about
there
that?
We go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for the technical difficulties there. So look, thank you very much for the invitation to come along to speak about our journey in terms of the 4-day week. I'll be fairly brief with everybody, just to say, number one, it was the best thing that we ever did. Number two, to follow what Alex suggested, we commenced with a trial in 2019 for 6 months. During that time, without having the benefit of 4-day week global, we learned a lot ourselves in trying to understand where we were going to save and become more productive in terms of our time and our time management in order to achieve the 100% productivity. So we did simple things like we, as Alex mentioned, we shortened meetings, we used technology better. We looked at our days, we looked at our weeks and the jobs that we needed to do, and we did a lot of leaning in the organization. And on the basis of that, we were at the end of our 6-month trial able to successfully say that we were ready to go on a full-time basis to a 4-day week. So since January of 2020, we have been on a 4-day week. It's been tremendously successful in terms of, I suppose, productivity. We increased our productivity to 27%, by 27%. We reduced unplanned attrition. We reduced hugely our single-day absenteeism. But the most important thing from our organization was the increase in terms of employee wellness and employee happiness. And we increased all of those scores by, on average, 33%. So that was the area that we found the most successful. I suppose normally people ask the question, well, did you have any learnings? Obviously, communication is key, involving your team from the ground up, making sure that people are involved in the programme and that they're part of the solution and part of finding the pathway to success. It's not going to work if it's a top-down situation. It's got to work from the ground up. And I've heard Andrew speak about this on a number, Andrew Barnes, that Joe mentioned earlier on, speak about it on a number of occasions. It's a huge gift to be able to give people the chance of 4 days working versus a 5-day working. So what we found is that the team in the office, and we are a small organisation, 50 odd people. We were 52 at the time. We're back up now to 60 again after the pandemic. But the gift of the additional day off was the most important thing for us and for our organisation. We decided in terms of our model that we would go with a fixed flexibility model. As an organisation, we're involved in recruitment and training. We're based on the west of Ireland and we have 3 offices in Galway, Limerick and Sligo. But we needed to be open to our clients over the 5-day, Monday to Friday week. In fact, some of our offices actually open on a Saturday. So what we decided was we would build our model around a 3-day weekend. So everybody in the office works 4 days and is off for a 3-day weekend, or they're off for a 3-day weekend and then they work 4 days. So you work Monday to Thursday, or indeed you work Tuesday to Friday and you have 3 days off. And that for us has been the most exciting part of the project. People know that every single week they're going to have a 3-day weekend. Makes a huge difference to their life and their lifestyle. And as I said, you know, the success is in the measurements. So Joe, I'm not sure if there's specifically anything additional that you'd like me to add or point out, and I can certainly ask any questions that you might have for me or indeed anybody else has.
No, that's perfect. Margaret, thank you so much for your contributions and your insight from your own experience at the ICE group. If you're able to stay on for the Q&A, we can certainly come to you if there's any specific questions from any of the audience about the ICE experience.
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Rosa, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the project manager for the 4-day week initiative at XPath. XPath are a consultancy based in Berlin who are joining us on this journey, trialing the 4-day week themselves as part of our European pilot in Germany, but also promoting the initiative more broadly within Germany. So over to you, Rosa.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosa. As Joe said, I'm the project manager for the 4-day week at XPath. We are based in Berlin. As Joe said, we offer relocation services and language courses to anyone wanting to move to Germany. And yeah, to give you a bit of an idea about the company, currently we have about 60 full-time employees, and we work with over 100 freelancers who support us with the language courses and doing coaching sessions for the people who need some guidance with German bureaucracy, which is a lot of fun, I can tell you. And yes, our employees, ever since we grew to the size and even before, our employees really wanted or kept asking us whether to reduce their hours. So this is something that we heard very frequently, even before the pandemic. But just like Alex said earlier, the pandemic really made us realize that changes are possible and they can be beneficial, both on a personal level, but also for the company. And that was when our CEO decided that we should have some sort of general policy for our employees. And also both of them have already experimented with reducing their own working hours, so that they would be able to take better care of their families, but also work on other side projects. So they have a bit of a head start compared to the other employees. But this is really what made them take that decision and to do some research on the topic, which is when they found 4-day Global. And as Joe said, we partnered up with them because we're quite keen to bring this movement to Europe, but also specifically to Germany. And yeah, that is basically a summary of how we have come to be part of this project. And we are looking very much forward to starting the pilot at the end of January of next year. We have already told the team, everyone is very excited about this project. And at this point in time, we are looking to to team up with other companies that would like to join this pilot, so we can share the knowledge that we have gathered so far and go into the pilot phase together with them. And of course, it can be any company. If they're based in Germany, then we have a few more things in common, I would argue. But other than that, we are very keen to have some sort of exchange with other companies and see whether we can bring in more people to try this out on a bigger scale in Europe and in Germany specifically. Yeah. Anything else, Joe, that you would like me to add to this?
No, that's fantastic, Rosa. Thanks so much for that. I'm now going to share my screen, so hopefully you should be able to see these slides in a moment. You've heard a lot about 4-Day Week Global, the pilot, and also the research project that we're running. So I'm just going to give you some detail on that. Maybe if someone could indicate to me that they can see my slides, that would be fantastic. Okay, great. So as I mentioned earlier, our organization was established back in 2019. We support businesses all over the world to implement reduced hours working. Pre-pandemic, this was very much working with individual companies from a very broad range of industries and countries to support them to trial or transition to this model. And over the course of the last year or so, we've really shifted our focus towards running these major global pilot programs. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about this in a few moments, but we have over 200 companies right now from 6 countries taking part in trials in 2022 alone. We also engage in advocacy on the issue of shorter work weeks. We engage in research projects, and we also provide resources and support to national initiatives and campaigns who want to get up and running to promote this issue. And really everything that we do is based around this concept of the 100-80-100 rule, which was designed by our founders as part of the Perpetual Guardian trial that I referenced earlier. And really, Andrew Barnes, when he embarked on this particular initiative, was very motivated by the question of productivity and was very motivated by this idea that, you know, he had read a lot of research that suggested that there was a lot of unlocked.
Switched off to go back to it.
Sorry, Margaret, could you just go on mute there for a sec? Thank you. He was very motivated by the research that he had read that suggested that there was a lot of unlocked potential in organizations in the 21st century in relation to, you know, some of the things that Alex and Margaret spoke about earlier on. And he wanted to figure out if he gave this incredibly transformative benefit of an extra day off in exchange for a much sharper focus on output and results, could he deliver better business performance? So our trials are very much based around this model of 100% pay, 80% time, but in exchange for a commitment to delivering 100% of the output. The pilot programs that we've been running this year that I mentioned earlier started with a trial that took place in Ireland with 17 companies taking part. That trial has now completed. We've had another trial taking place in North America, actually 2 of them this year, one with 40 companies and a further 25 in the fall. The largest 4-day week trial that's taken place anywhere in the world started in June in the UK with 73 companies participating. And as you can see, we've also had a program in Australia and New Zealand, which started in August of this year. So overall, there are more than 10,000 employees worldwide that are taking part in these trials. We expect to have the first major research report from the trials being published in November of this year. But we have got some initial findings and some initial midpoint data, which Juliet, my colleague, will share with you in a couple of moments. We're also collaborating with the Valencian regional government and the Portuguese national government on their own pilot program initiatives. And really, we were very excited to launch this particular program. You know, what we've been doing over the last year, we've had a lot of interest from companies in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Spain, in France, from right across Europe in taking part in this initiative. And this European pilot program is really the first opportunity for us to do that. So what's involved in this is effectively 4 main areas of support from our point of view. The first is we provide training to companies through virtual events, digital resources, and workshops. And really, this is very much geared around supporting companies in the first instance in the pre-trial planning, preparation, and design for running their 4-day week initiative. Our experience is very much that those companies that get the pre-trial planning phase right and that use that time to identify changes to work practices, identify efficiencies, and get people working together on process improvements, they're the companies that find this transition to be a lot smoother and give themselves a much higher chance of success. So this involves both masterclasses from leaders like our founder, Andrew Barnes, like Alex and other people who we work with, and also much more specific sessions on things that are relevant and related to making your 4-day week project a success, like time management, like productivity hacks, and like workday reinvention. We also have a mentoring program where we match up participating companies with other leaders who've successfully implemented 4-day weeks in similar contexts and settings to them. So we try to do this based on companies of a similar size, from a similar industry, to provide additional advice, support, and guidance during the trial period. The third main area is networking, and this is about creating a space where leaders can engage and collaborate with leaders from all over the world who are taking part in our trials, who have already taken part in our trials. And this offers an opportunity to open source some of those questions, some of those issues, some of those challenges that you might be experiencing outside of the structured sessions that we run, and to figure out how others have dealt with these or are dealing with these. And then finally, we offer research and analysis by a team of world-class academics led by Dr. Juliet Shore in Boston College, who you'll hear from in a couple of moments. So just to give you a sense of how this looks from a timeline perspective, right now we're in the recruitment and information sharing phase, where we're meeting with different companies, running these information events, and talking about the program with companies who are interested in exploring the possibility of experimenting with this. And by the end of October, we'll hopefully have signed up the cohort to participate in the European pilot. Preparation, training, and onboarding will commence in November. In January, we'll be establishing baseline metrics for the research aspect and helping companies in their final preparations to get trial ready. And then the coordinated start date for the trial is the 30th of January, although we do have some flexibility with that for different companies if they wish to start earlier or later. So I'm going to hand over now to Juliet, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what the research project that we're running sets out to achieve, and what that involves specifically from the perspective of you guys as prospective participating companies.
Thank you so much, Joe, and wonderful to be here with you all today. Joe, can you stop your screen saving for a minute? Yeah, great. Let me just get myself a little bit more light here. It's really exciting to be conducting the research for this trial, and also to have a pan-European trial. I think is pretty exciting. We're trying to figure out language issues across quite a number of countries, but I think we'll be able to get that straightened out. So I'm going to share my screen and tell you a little bit about the research, and then I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. So is that working for everyone? Yeah? It's okay. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, all good.
All right, great, thanks. So here you can see that we're going to be looking at three sort of buckets of outcomes from the trial. Economic, primarily impacts on your firms and organizations. Social, which includes the well-being aspects and other social dimensions of your employees, and then also environmental impacts of the 4-day week. This is our research team. I'm an economist by training. About 20 years ago, I joined the sociology department at Boston College. I started researching work time issues back in the 1980s, so I have a long history of this, but I also look at things like the impact of work time on climate emissions, and I've done a lot on labor. I was originally a labor economist, and as I say, now have added sociology. I've done the last 10 years, worked a lot on gig work. My colleague Gwen Fawn is also a specialist in work and health issues and work family. She is also conducting a major study of the impact of remote work. And Golin Gu, who you'll interact with a lot, is the PhD candidate who takes care of a lot of the logistics of our data collection and communication with companies. So prior research has found many benefits to work time reduction, on stress and burnout, job and life satisfaction, sleep, physical and mental health, work-family conflict, higher quality leisure time. And I'm just going to give you some results that we got from the midpoint of the first trial, which just finished. And yesterday I got a little bit of data from the end of the trial, so 6 months after we started. But what you can see here is that work time was reduced. In this midpoint trial, the work time reduced less than what we see for the whole period, and also for a different group of companies. We had one large company in here who had a big group that wasn't participating. But here we have about a 4-hour a week reduction, and we're gonna see a much bigger reduction in all the other data. But more satisfaction with time, reduced work stress, reduced work burnout. And these numbers are from scales where people had a 1 to 4. So work stress went from a 3.1 to a 2.76. The little asterisks on the side show that these are statistically significant changes, meaning they're big enough to not just be a random change. So we can have confidence that they're actually really happening. The burnout, you see, the higher this T number, the more statistical confidence we have. So a big decline in burnout, about 0.5 point on the scale. Improvements in work-family balance, improvements in life satisfaction, people less likely to say they're planning to leave for another job. And I'm going to skip over the sleep for a minute. Mental health gets better, physical health gets better. Job satisfaction didn't change that much on this one, and we think that's because people knew when they took the baseline survey, which is the first survey, they were already getting the 4-day week, so their satisfaction with their job had already risen. I want to call your attention to sleep time, sleep deprivation, and sleep problems. In the middle of the trial, we found 1/2 hour of sleep more per night. And by the end of the trial, the results I got yesterday, people are sleeping 1 hour more per night on average, which is an enormous impact. And one of the things this research is going to do is try and figure out how much of all these other benefits that people are getting is due to sleeping more, because we know sleep has a big impact on people's well-being. The sleep deprivation numbers went from about this 43% here down to 17%. So by the end of the trial, fewer than 20% of employees were getting less than 7 hours a night, and that's considered sleep deprivation. Sleep problems went down. Just very quickly, what are people doing on their time, their day off? This is what we're going to be mostly asking about in the midpoint survey. So 3 months into the trial, people are spending a lot of time in leisure activities, which is part of why they feel so much more satisfied, and why they feel happier. A bit more in personal maintenance, they're not much, but just a little bit more here. I think we don't have sleeping here. And they're spending a lot of time on housework. So these are differences between men and women. And one of the things you see is it's not too different how men and women are spending their time off, which is interesting. Men doing a fair amount of household work and caring, 5.5 hours on that day off. So what are we going to be asking about? Well, as I briefly mentioned, we're going to get performance metrics from you, workplace well-being and employee burnout, well-being and life satisfaction more generally, that is outside of the workplace. we're looking at the gender distribution of labor. Does it change? We know that men and women don't have equal roles in household labor. Does it change at all? We're looking at carbon footprints and environmental impacts and lots of other things too. We're going to break our sample down by subgroups, age and gender, whether people are working remote, size of firm, and so forth. So what's the data we're collecting? We're going to be collecting from you, the companies, monthly data. We're going to ask for it every other month, but we'd like monthly data on some kind of productivity metrics if you have them, your revenue data, retention, so how many people are leaving the company or the organization, how much absenteeism is there, energy use, and then every company is allowed to add or can add some metrics that things that you already collect or want to start collecting that are really important for you. You can put those in the bi-monthly data upload and we'll do some analysis with them. We have 4 waves of employee surveys. There's what's called baseline, or the first survey, which is taken before the trial starts. 3 months into the trial or midpoint, we do another wave. That is, as I said, mostly focuses on how people are spending their time. And we have a really condensed group, the metrics that you saw that I just showed you around stress, burnout. Some of the key metrics we'll ask at that point. Diary, that's that time diary on how people are spending their time. And then we have an end of trial survey. And that repeats the questions from the baseline. So the sort of core analytic strategy is, how did things change from just before the trial started to the end of the trial, as a way of getting the impact of the trial. And we're going to be looking at that well-being, stress and health, job satisfaction, burnout, energy use. And then at the end of the trial, we're also interested in doing interviews with managers and with employees. So a little bit of a timeline. This is the wrong, sorry. Let me just skip over this. We don't need that. Okay, so what are we asking of you? The first is to assign a designated contact to liaise with our team. We're going to need email lists of your employees in order to send the surveys out to them. It's really important that we do the surveying and not you, so that employees can feel confident that the company is not going to be looking at their answers, so we can get really honest answers. You need to decide on the performance metrics that if you want to have individual performance metrics. We ask you to complete what's called an onboarding survey, which is just basic data about your company. Then we're going to ask you bi-monthly to upload those things that I just talked about. We try and get 6 months of comparative data for you, so we can say, okay, in the prior 6 months, this was your situation and now it's changed. And then also to facilitate interviews with managers and executives. And I guess I don't have a thank you slide, so I'll just say thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Julie, and really exciting and encouraging to see some of that initial data flowing through from the earlier trials. So we just have 3 questions in Slido, which I think is a new all-time low record, but we'll take that as the presentations having been so all-encompassing. We have the most popular question on productivity, which is not uncommon. So I've asked Alex maybe to take a little bit more time to delve into this one. And the question is from Sarah Morgan, asking, how have other companies measured productivity and over what period of time for short-term versus long-term impact?
Sure. So this is a great and sort of once you start getting into it, sort of a technically challenging question. I think that for so I'll go at it a couple ways. As a practical matter, sort of during trials, companies that successfully complete their pilots and move to a 4-day week on a permanent basis tend to look at two things. One of them is whatever standards and measures they have previously used, whether it is, whether it's KPIs, whether it's looking at, or whether they organize their work in, PERT, or they're using Agile or some other sort of technique, sticking with those ways of managing workflow and assessing work. The other thing that they do is, of course, keep an eye on the financial numbers, right? And because no company wants to move to a 4-day week at the expense of financial health, very few are able to do that. And the good news is that virtually none are in the position, find themselves in the position of having to choose between reduced revenues and maintaining a 4-day week. The one other thing that lots of places will do is during the trial, kind of take the pulse or the temperature of sentiment within the organization, right? Are people feeling extra stressed? Are they themselves feeling like the trial is going well, that they're able to get their work done? And this is important for getting an early sense of whether things are, whether there are potential challenges that may show up in workflow over the following weeks, but also generally to understand kind of how people, just how people are feeling about their work or the trial generally. Now, part of the reason that that we recommend going with those with familiar and simpler measures is, first of all, it's really easy to try to come up, with new complicated tools for assessing productivity. And generally what happens is that moves you from playing like 3-dimensional chess, figuring out how to do a 5-day, do in 4 days what you had done in 5, to a 7-dimensional game whose rules you don't necessarily completely understand. Familiar measures are good because people understand them. They understand how to measure their own work and their own performance against them. And so, even if you feel like they're not perfect, if people know how to use them and know how to interpret them, then they're better than something that is novel and unfamiliar. The other thing is that there is evidence that introducing measurement systems, and particularly surveilling people more closely, actually has unintended consequences for productivity and engagement levels. When you surveil people more, that communicates that you trust them less. And so people actually are less likely to perform well when they know that they are being watched really closely. So a slightly counterintuitive result, but when you think a little bit about kind of human nature, maybe one that makes a bit more sense. The one other thing I will say is that, that part of what you're doing in trials is, trying to generate enough data so that you can understand, if you're a large organization and you're testing it in one department, say, whether you can, how this will scale across the organization. And there can be a temptation to try to over measure, right? To come to generate more rather than fewer data points. And I think that you need that early on, you need to have the confidence to, in a sense, measure less rather than to try to measure absolutely everything. You can't turn that into a job on its own, or put too much on managers and team leaders at the potential expense of actually leading, working through problems, helping people kind of solve challenges, and instead being diverted to to trying to gather data. So I think with if people have more detailed questions about productivity measures and such, I'm happy to answer those. But I think with that, I'll turn things back over to Joe.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that, Alex. I'm going to just go through a few practical questions about pilot participation very quickly. One question is, how do we apply for being part of the program, from Bryce? Another one is, what are the costs involved in participating in the pilot, from Corrine? I'll take those together. How do you apply for being part of the program? We have a collaboration agreement, which we can circulate to anybody who's interested in joining the program. Quickest and easiest way to get us is on the email address program@4dayweek.com. And maybe Alex, you might just drop that into the chat if you get an opportunity. And effectively, we'll send you over what is an overview engagement agreement, which takes you through, here's what you can expect from us in terms of, here are the kinds of supports and services that we will deliver as part of the pilot program. And here's what we expect from you as a participant in the pilot. In relation to costs, we are a not-for-profit organization, but in order to sustain running these programs and operating these programs, there is costs associated. Most of our funding comes from companies who participate in our programs worldwide. And effectively, this is done on a sliding scale based on the number of employees you have in your organization, or the number of employees that you have that are taking part in the pilot. And that goes from a level of €2,000 if you're a company with less than 20 employees, right the way up to €20,000 if you're a company with more than 1,000 employees. Generally, if you're something like 50, 60, it might be something like 5,000, 6,000. So we can send over that breakdown of what that means for each company size if you're interested in moving ahead with joining the program. And there is also a 10% reduction if you're a nonprofit organization like ourselves. Can we get a copy of a recording of this meeting? Yes, you can. The recording will be circulated to all participants in this session. Can UK companies participate in this Europe pilot? Yes, you can. We plan on running another full-scale UK pilot with our partners in the UK at some point later next year. But if you want to run a trial on an earlier timeline or in line with this European program timeline that I outlined earlier, then you can join this program. I'm going to answer this one as well. How do bank holidays work, especially for people having each Monday off? There's one of two ways you can do this. We have seen companies do this whereby on a week where a public holiday or a bank holiday falls, that acts as the scheduled day off for everyone on the team. So every week effectively is a 4-day week, and you don't have 3-day weeks on weeks where there's a public holiday. We also have lots of organizations where if there's a public holiday on that week, people still get their scheduled day off in addition to that, and in effect, it becomes a 3-day week. And really, this comes down to your own internal operations. It is a decision and a choice, which is very much geared around your own business operations and what's actually deliverable and sustainable for you. I'm going to go to you with this one, Alex, which is, what challenges have companies come across while trying to operationalize the 4-day working week, for example, with working patterns, wages, annual leave, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So I think that the challenges, okay, 90% of the challenges are logistical, right? Or of choosing, first off, choosing what kind of shorter week schedule makes sense given sort of their market. Most companies move to a 4-day week doing Monday through Thursdays, though there are some departments that might do a rota system where, it's Monday through Thursday for half the team and Tuesday through Friday for the rest. There are a smaller number of companies that will choose shorter hours, doing 6-hour days, let's say 5 days a week. It really depends a lot. It depends mainly on your sense of the market and the kind of work that you do. This is one of the things that we help you think through. I think that the other principal operational challenges have to do with sort of looking at the design of your workday and thinking through, are there ways in which you can, for example, give people more of time for deep focus, right? For sort of deep work. How can you ring fence meetings or set aside times in which create no meeting days that can sort of free up more time in people's schedules. I think that the issues around things like annual leave turn out to be simpler than people expect. I've gone back to companies that I interviewed in my book about the 4-day week, which came out a couple of years ago, and was asking them about bank holidays, which is something that always comes up. And their answer, their answer is, why are you asking us about this? We just take bank holidays. It's like, it's not for them, it's kind of not a thing. There are I think that, but the other big challenge, I think, is kind of a cultural one, which is that we are all so accustomed to thinking that that sort of professionalism that is defined by a capacity to work long hours and to go kind of above and beyond, that our professional identities, but also our career success depends on sort of embracing overwork as a kind of badge of honor. That backing away from that and thinking about your relationship to work and work time differently that's actually like one of the hardest things for sort of leaders, for employees, for everybody to sort of embrace. And I think but it is something that eventually takes a little time, but people do. And once they do, they discover that, or the challenges of figuring out how to make a 4-day week work are every bit as engaging and rewarding as any other kind of professional challenge that they have encountered in their working lives. But, it's one that once they figure it out, sort of helps makes their work more sustainable, makes them happier, and I think generally makes them also, better, more fulfilled workers. So I'll stop there and turn things back over to Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alex. Susanna had a question about interpretation and translation. And just to say, Susanna, let's take that offline, because we will have interpretation and translation services available for a number of European countries, but not for all. So this is something that maybe we can answer more clearly and work through with you. If you want to just drop us a line. Hi, Susanna. Thanks for that. 3 questions which all in some way relate to part-time work. So I'm going to make a stab at this, and maybe Alex, you might want to jump in afterwards. Susanna also asked if the reduction in work time should apply to all employees in every role. Gary asks, how do you accommodate people who already work 4 days but do so across 5 days so they can drop and collect school kids? And then we also had a question from someone anonymously who asked, we will need to pay currently part-time people a full-time wage. Why should the finance team agree on this? And are there measurable benefits and effects? So starting point is defining who should be in the project. And our experience working with organizations is that the best definition as to whether somebody should be covered by the 4-day week policy is A, are they a part of your core team as it currently stands, and B, would most of your other HR policies apply to them? In other words, if you've got somebody who's working 5 hours a week doing security, doing cleaning, on a contract basis, on an agency basis, if they sit outside of your regular operational model, it might well be the case that it is not necessary for this policy to extend to them. However, if you're talking about part-time employees that are working half-time, that are working 4 days, it is likely that you will need to try and accommodate them within the framework of this policy in some way. And we tend to see this done in one of 2 ways primarily. The first is that you apply the 180-100 rule, or whatever version it is that you're using of that. So just to say, it is not mandatory for every company that participates in our programs that they go immediately to a 20% work time reduction. We do work with companies where it might be closer to 10%. It might be initially, 4 slightly longer days or a 9-day fortnight with a view to eventually moving towards the 4-day, 32-hour work week. But we don't work with companies where it's 4 10-hour days. So there needs to be genuine work time reduction is effectively the way we define participation. So what we see with part-time staff is that that ratio or that model that you're applying to your full-time employees is also applied to your part-time staff. So for example, if someone is working half-time currently, it would be 50, 40, 50 effectively. You can also do that with with employees that are currently on a 4-day work week, but we do see commonly in those scenarios, if it is the case that when you look at employees that are working a 4-day week currently, if their expectations and their responsibilities and their output is either currently the same as their 5-day colleagues, or if after your 5-day colleagues and the definition of full-time becomes 4 days, it will be the same, then I think there's a strong case to be made to equalize their salary. But we generally, that solution of effectively, swapping the hourly reduction for a pay increase, we see most commonly with people who are already on a 4-day work week. So I hope that that's helpful and makes sense. Alex, do you have any other thoughts or comments on part-time, maybe in particular that question around, how you sell or justify this, to a finance team? What are the benefits of actually doing this?
Right. So I think that one of the things I would actually look at is how much recruitment and turnover are costing your organization, because I have seen places where after implementing a shorter work week, turnover has gone from more than 100% down to 10 to 15%. And what that means is that Pursuit Marketing, for example, up in Glasgow, they went from spending £250,000 a year on recruitment and going to career events and so forth to spending nothing. And so that was an amazing savings just right off the bat in an industry where job hopping is the norm. In another, in nursing homes, for example, where they've implemented shorter working hours for certified nurses assistants, the kind of frontline workers, generally not terribly well paid, who work with residents, kind of get them through their days. Moving to a shorter work week while keeping salaries the same has sort of resulted in enough savings in recruiting fees, and especially in not having to hire temp workers at 4 or 5 times the normal hourly rate, so that you actually have to hire more people. Your salary spend goes up, but you make up for that in savings elsewhere, and you also get higher quality of care. So the final thing I will say is that there are a few companies that talk about how people who had gone to 4-day weeks, 3 or 4 day weeks previously, actually had developed a lot of the practices that became standard across the organization when they moved to a 4-day week. So, your working parents who are already on, 2/3 or 80% time, and are sometimes as productive or more so than they were before, are actually your leading indicators or your innovators who you should look to to understand how to, what practices you want to implement at scale in order to make this a success. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Alex. Final questions. Corinne asked about the criteria used for selection. I think I've already detailed one of the primary criteria, which is the nature of the policy, that it has to include genuine work time reduction for the same pay is probably the biggest, the biggest reason why we might say to a company, this program isn't for you. Outside of that, this is very much a broad tent. We have companies ranging from 15,000 employees to 15 employees in our trials. We have companies in, the sectors that you might more traditionally associate with the shorter work week movement, like tech and finance and software, to brewery and a fish and chip shop in our UK trials. So, it will set out in the collaboration agreement what is expected, but it's not a particularly high bar. It is part of what we want to do is help as many companies from as many different settings to make this work. And that will also, I think, really strengthen the diversity of the research that we're doing on these trials as well. I think a good question to finish is the last one that we have to get to, if I can just find it here, which is, have you had any business yet that have tried it and then gone back to a 5-day week? And if so, why? So, I'm not really sure why I thought it was a good idea to end a webinar on failure, but let's go for it anyway. our experience is that the failure rate for this is much higher before the trial than during or after the trial. Something like 1 in 5 companies that contacts us and commits to saying, you know, we want to do this. In some cases, they might even announce it internally, might end up not going ahead with it for a variety of different reasons. Maybe there's been a change in their external environment, a financial crisis, a leadership change. Maybe their leadership has overthought it and got cold feet. Maybe they've come up against a particular operational barrier or blockage in a section of the business that they feel they can't overcome. And that's part of why the support that we provide is very much front-loaded in that pre-trial planning, preparation, and design phase, because our experience is that in most cases, once a company satisfies itself operationally that they feel comfortable with launching a trial, to a certain extent, they've already worked with their people and their teams to figure out that they can make this work.